Greetings, programs, and welcome to another episode of the Awesome Friday podcast, the podcast where we look at two new things every week. My name is Matthew, and with me, not as always, is Rachel Ho, because Simon's on holiday. Hi, Rachel, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Thank you for subbing in for Simon once again. This seems to be, one more time, I think will make it a regular occurrence.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there. I hope one day, like, you could take the week off, and then I could do one with Simon. I've never spoken to him. It's kind of funny. I feel like I'm taking Simon's seat, but I've never actually spoken to the man.
I mean, if you just want to be our regular sub, technically speaking, I am going to be off next week, so we could do that.
There you go. There you go.
This-
Just is it going to be Simon on his own? Is that what he's going to do?
We hadn't sorted it out yet, so I think we might have just done that. This is all predicated on the idea that Simon will know how to produce the podcast and send it to me to be posted. So, not to throw too much shade at my partner here, but one of us handles the technical aspect of this, and it's not him.
I mean, it's not me on Contra Zoom either. So to be fair, I feel like it's me, Simon, and I always say Pierre over at Classic Movies Live. I feel like we all do the same role. We just come around just for a good time. We don't have to do anything else afterwards.
What's good though, you guys you bring insightful commentary and color to the commentary. It's good.
Hopefully. Do we?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we don't. We're like the color commentators in a broadcast booth. You guys are the play-by-play. We're just the ones going, how about them Blue Jays? Cool.
I mean, I don't have quite nasally enough of a voice to be a baseball commentator very specifically. Like, I feel like you really need to have a real Buck Martinez, like...
I mean, Dan Schulman's got a beautiful voice, though. He's got very lovely dulcet tones to his baritone voice. But you're right, Buck is a little nasally.
Yeah. I mean, there's always Joe Buck, too, but apparently he's a bit of a garbage person, so let's not talk about him too much.
Oh, yeah. Joe, I haven't actually heard his voice in a long time, it feels like.
Yeah. I did recently, because not that long ago I rewatched all of Brockmire, and he is recurring as himself on Brockmire, which is pretty funny, actually.
A friend of mine who's been trying to get me to watch Brockmire for a while. I keep meaning to watch it, because it sounds like something I would really like, but just haven't done it yet.
So we were not planning on talking about Brockmire, but this is now going to be the Brockmire podcast because it is. I don't know if you're aware of the premise of the show, but Hank Azaria doing his baseball commentator voice, and that's it. That's the whole show, and it is.
But
great.
like that's exactly something that I would want to watch, because it's Hank Azaria. Who doesn't love him? He's incredibly affable human being, and then it's about baseball, and I'm into that. So there you go.
Are you aware of the setup of the show? Because it's really funny. So the setup
of the literally what you said is all I know about the show. It's Hank Azaria and it's baseball broadcast. That's it.
Okay, so in the first episode, and this started out as being like just a joke between him and I can't remember who it was, but it was a joke between him and someone else that like a baseball commentator could say literally anything on air as long as they maintained the count. And so the first scene in the first episode is Brockmire recounting the story of him walking in on his wife having an orgy while calling a baseball game.
I mean, he's not wrong. That's not off. Like, in a much kind of more PG, heartwarming version of it, but Vin Scully passed away this summer, and a lot of people have been recounting a lot of his like greatest hit clips. And the people talk about the way that he was able to tell a full story and just randomly pop in, oh, this is going on, like, and hits a single, the verse, and like this and that. And then there's the joke about the Castellanos, because what was it, the Reds guy? He had to make an apology on air, and then he made his apology, and like I think Castellanos hit a home run at the same time.
Yeah.
And so but that's actually really funny. I should really watch that show. I wonder where it's going.
So the whole rest of the show is he obviously melts down while calling an MLB game, and the whole rest of the show is he's disappeared for 10 years in like a drunken like bender in like around the world, and he comes back to be the commentator for a single like a AAA team in the middle of nowhere in a town that's been devastated by fracking. It's really funny.
Wow. That's a lot. Okay, I'm gonna start watching it. I'll watch it. I was supposed to watch Severance this week, actually. That was the show I was supposed to get into.
I mean, that's a good show too. That's a very high
Yeah,
concept.
because
Good
after
science
Better Call
fiction
Saul
show.
finished, I was like, I need a new show to watch, and I think everyone's been telling me to watch Severance. So, and then Only Murders finished, which I really enjoyed that one too.
Yeah. You know, my dirty like nerd confession for like current nerd events is that I have not watched a single episode of Better Call Saul, and
It's good.
that's a
It's a
problem. I know
good
it's
one.
good. Everything about it looks good. I just never did it, and I don't know
Were
why.
Were you a Breaking Bad fan?
Yeah, I really like Breaking Bad. I kind of
So
I kind of have problems with some of the discourse around Breaking Bad, but the show itself is good.
I only got into Better Call Saul over lockdown. Like it became my lockdown show. Like everybody told me I would really like it, and first I think probably the same reason I just never got around to it. I was always like, yeah, I know that there's a show, a Better Call Saul or a Breaking Bad prequel, and I heard it was good. I thought, okay, just never bothered to watch it. But then because of lockdown, I did, and yeah, I got really into it. I was on like the Reddit forums all day and I'm just like arguing with internet strangers. I'm like, no, Howard Hamlin did not deserve that, you guys. And yeah, that was me. But I highly recommend that show. It's a good one. You probably really enjoy it. It's a slow burn though. I think that's the thing. Is like it's a fairly slow show, so it's not one that. That's actually not true. Like there are moments where you're like waiting to see what happens in the next episode, but yeah.
I am fully cognizant of the fact that there is no good reason for me to not watch this show. Everything about it is direct at my alley. Just every time I look at it, I just don't watch. I don't know I don't know what it is. It's not rational or correct. I just don't. There's been plenty of times, even during lockdown, it could have been our lockdown show, but instead we watched The Office like 4 times, which I also don't regret.
I was gonna say that's good too. I haven't watched the latter seasons of The Office. I basically stopped watching after Michael Scott left, and then didn't really give the show a proper chance afterwards. But I've heard if as long as your mindset is towards it's a completely different show for those seasons, then it's fine because it's just not the same without Michael Scott. It's like it's a different thing. But I just didn't bother. And every time I do a rewatch, I will stop at Michael Scott and then just start from the beginning again.
Well, it doesn't help that it's not that it's really a different show. It's just more of an ensemble from that point on, right? Like The Office is very much the Michael Scott show with
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of wacky people around him for those 7 years, and then after that, it's much more of an ensemble piece. But it's not as good. I'll fully admit, but I actually really like the season with James Spader as Robert California. Who, if you've watched the end of season 7, he interviews to be the office manager, and in the
Yeah.
first episode of this next season, he shows up for work and then drives to the headquarters of the company and talks his way into the CEO's job. It's amazing.
Was that what happened? I didn't even know that. That's funny.
Yeah. So he only shows up and he's just such a different presence, and James Spader is such a weird,
Yeah.
wonderful presence. It's I really enjoyed it.
He's
The
an
last
odd
season,
man.
yeah,
He's
I
cool,
really.
but he's an odd dude. Like I was doing some David Cronenberg stuff earlier this year, and so I watched Crash, and I hadn't seen Crash in a million years. It felt like, and I'm like, James Spader was so weird, but so oddly attractive. Like there was something about the man that you're so drawn to, but he's so weird, and you feel weird about finding him attractive. I don't know if that's what he's going for, the conflicting attraction, but
I think the
he's
thing is that he's not actually going for any of it. I think he's just there and he's
just living his life.
just living his best life. I think the same thing could probably be said about, say, like Less Than Zero from the '80s, or he has a wonderful sleazy turn in that Jack Nicholson movie Wolf, where I think the same thing. He has that same. He never doesn't have that energy. You know.
It's very unsettling, but
Yeah.
again, very attractive. It's very conflicting. He's so weird. Like he makes you question your own decision making and your own taste. You're just like, I don't get it, but it works somehow with James Spader. But
Yeah.
he's like he's got like I mean, Age of Ultron was not a great movie,
I really
but
like
I
that
would
movie
say he
actually.
was. I don't know what it was about that one. It just felt. I think it just felt
It's
like a really lesser than Avengers. Like the first Avengers was good. Like it was actually a really good movie, and then I just felt like Age of Ultron was a lesser than maybe if that was the only Avengers, I wouldn't have been so down on it. But because there was one that I had seen, so my bar was already kind of high.
I
But
think
I
we could
thought
talk about
Spader
this.
was really good in it. He was great in
Yeah,
it. Though.
I think we could talk about Age of Ultron for hours, but I think my legitimate belief is that that movie is a 3 hour movie that's been cut down to two, and so it's not great,
Yeah,
but there's
yeah.
definitely like connective tissue that's not there.
Saying
Like
it's like
it's
release the Whedon cut, release the Joss cut. Is that
no, we're sort of way. I don't know, no, no, for so many reasons,
no,
no.
no, no. Stop it right now. Nip it in the bud.
Yeah, pretty much. Yep. Good. Well, that is nothing like any of the movies we're going to talk about today. So let's move on and do that. As usual, we're going to talk about two films. The first of which is an indie religious mockumentary satire thing, and the second of which is the latest from certified masterpiece maker George Miller. But we're going to start with the former of those, which is called Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul. And Rachel, why don't you give us the lowdown on Honk for Jesus? I feel like, I would like to hear what your plot breakdown of this, because I don't know that I can do it.
First off, one of the great movie titles. Like it's the weirdest movie. It's a James Spader movie title. It's not. It's not. It doesn't work. Like it's weird, but somehow I think the more that I say it, the more that I hear it and I read it, the more I actually really like it. Even though I've been
Yeah,
short editing it to just Jesus. Okay, so basically this movie it's going to take on the mega church culture of the States, and this is particularly in Atlanta, Georgia. And you've got one pastor and his wife, which they call a first lady, and that's apparently like a legit thing. I was reading up about it, and that's a real thing. They do call the wife of the pastor of a megachurch pastor the first lady, which I found really funny. It's starring
that's a
Sterling K. Brown.
okay.
It's weird. It's really really strange. So it's Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall, both of who are magnificent. And basically, we have Sterling K. Brown who plays the pastor, and he's he leads the church, and it's very popular, and they're very successful. They've earned a lot of money. They've made like they have a huge mansion, massive wardrobe, but then, as is the way of a lot of these things, a big I don't want to say a tragedy. It's not a tragedy because this is not tragic, but a big conflict arises, and Sterling K. Brown's character is wrapped up in some allegations of sexual assault, specifically to potentially minors or those who just became adults at 18. And the lead character is actually Regina Hall, who it's the story is about her journey in how she dealt with her husband's indiscretion, shall we say. And then the movie leads up to them trying to rebrand the church and bring it back. And that's what the mockumentary side of it is the film kind of cuts between a documentary that's being made about them and their rise back up to the top. But then we also see just outside of the filming of the mockumentary, we see bits of that as well. That would be my breakdown of the movie.
Yeah, that's about as yeah, that's pretty much it. Um, I feel very conflicted about this movie, to be perfectly honest. Um, it's there's okay. First off, there's several things that I like about it. One, how can you go bad? How can you go wrong with Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall? Like
Yeah.
they are incredible performers, and they definitely bring their A game to this film. I actually also really liked, and I'm going to mispronounce her name, but Nicole Bahari and Confidence, which it's an amazing name, just for the record, play like a competing pair of church leaders, and I thought they were great. I thought much of the filming was really, really good. Um, I felt like the whole thing is a little bit let down by its script, though, which isn't to say that it's bad exactly, just not great. I don't know. Help me out here. Like I feel like this movie is sort of let down by the weight of its expectations. I feel like it is not as good as it probably should be, is maybe the least polite way to say it. Is that fair?
I'd agree with that. I think that I liked it. I thought that I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was fun to watch. It did feel longer than I realized it was, which is never a really great sign. But for the most part, I enjoyed the movie. I will say that I agree with you though that I feel like there was a lot of potential that wasn't met, and to me that difference is very very marginal. It's a very fine line to cross, but it it's a good movie. It's an above average movie in my opinion, but it really could have been a pretty great film. And I can't really put my finger on though what it was exactly that doesn't elevate it to like a great film. I feel like it's funny, like you said, Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall are both incredibly tremendous. Sterling K. Brown, I think he does more dramatic stuff. Like he's mostly known for This Is Us. But he's really funny. Like he's incredibly humorous and he's very charismatic. Regina Hall does the best of both worlds. I think she's an incredible dramatic actress. She's obviously very funny as well. That's how she made her career. And she does an incredible scene in mime makeup, like just dressed up as like a clown. Like her face is painted up as the clown, as a mime, and she's able to do this really big, the big dramatic moment of the movie, all while wearing mime makeup. And I feel like that's kind of the that's the essence of the movie in a sense, is like it's really dramatic but yet there's like a face of comedy over it, and the two of them together is incredible. Like they have that scene, I think it's going to be the one that most people are going to talk about when they rap along to a song which I can't remember the name of it now. I think it's like knuckle buckle knuckle something is the
Yeah, I
name
don't
of
remember
it,
what it is
and
either.
it's an Atlanta song, and there it's incredible. Like they do it in the car together and it's really fun. But yeah, but there's something kind of lacking in the movie. I don't know if it's maybe the focus was a bit split on, you know, is it a comedy, is it a drama, is it, they kind of try to do both as opposed to
Hmm.
being a comedy that has dramatic elements or a drama with comedic elements. um but yeah, it's one of those, it's kind of like almost like a biopic in many ways where the performances are amazing but the story itself is a bit lacking.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it might just be the script. I feel like the like everything that they're given, they do amazing work with. And
Mhm.
that one last monologue where she is wearing the mime makeup, the praise mime makeup, which is just I didn't Google it. Is praise mime a real thing? Because that's just what I just I
I
don't
think it
understand what
is. I
they're doing.
remember reading it in the press kit. I think it is like a legit thing. I think everything that they do in that movie is
It's pulled
fairly
from reality.
realistic. Yeah. Cuz the director Adamma Ebo, she was talking about like or they had written it in her notes of the on the movie. She basically took it from her own childhood. Like it's her own conflict with the church. She grew up with a big megachurch, Baptist megachurch. That's where she attended. Um, and there was a big controversy within their church as well with one of the pastors. And it made her as a young woman, you know, question herself, like question, the church gave her so much and she does, a massive part of her culture and of her upbringing, but she can obviously see the flaws in the entire endeavor. So it almost like this movie was kind of like working her way through those issues, like kind of
Hmm.
like trying to work out how she felt about it through the movie.
I guess what I was trying to say is because I got distracted by the praise mime thing. I guess what I was trying to say is that I feel like the script sort of promises at various points that it's going to go to all these different places, and I feel like
Mm,
it never really gets to any of them.
yeah,
If that makes sense, right? Like,
yeah.
I feel like it sort of does, but it only ever like glasses over the like the surface of whatever it's trying to explore. It never really explores any of it in real depth, with the possible exception of Regina Hall's character through that last monologue where she does like explain. I mean, she's basically trapped in her position. She feels anyway, and she's the only character that really has any development at all, like Sterling K. Brown. And that's not to say that that's a bad thing, but like if you're looking for a film where characters change and grow, this is not necessarily that film. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's hard to pin down, right? It's hard to pin down exactly why. And like, just to be clear, I liked this movie. I thought it was good. I'm recommending that you watch it when you get a chance to see it. Um, I'm just sort of, it's one of those movies that exists in that weird place where like I wish it's good, but I wish it were great, and I don't. And you should definitely see it. I just, with the warning that it's not as good as it maybe could be. That's a weird place to be coming at a movie from.
It's true. Yeah, it's a weird. It is a very very weird conflict for this movie because I think it's a fun movie to watch. I'll say, and I think I don't know about you. I watched it with I think three other people were in the cinema. There weren't
Hmm.
very many of us at the screening for it, but and they were. I mean, not to stereotype or anything like that, but they were of a certain demographic that I don't know if they really appreciated the humor or what was going on in the
Were they?
movie. I
Was it my demographic?
like older, I would
Oh,
say
okay.
potentially a little bit older even. Um, I think, anyways, I didn't actually really know them. I just saw them and
Mhm.
very awkwardly looked down at my phone and just pretended to be busy. But anyway, that's my behavior at screenings. Um, but I feel like this would be a really fun movie to watch in a crowd that kind of like it that will that it has its audience. I think that this movie has its audience, and it will
Hmm.
find its audience. And I think that if that's for you, if you can watch it in a theater with a bunch of people, I think it actually would be a really fun movie to go through and like watch it. But I'd agree with you. Like, from, like kind of objectively talking, if you just look at it as a piece of film, yeah, it could be better. I think it could be better, and I think it's almost unfair of me to say that though because I offer nothing in the ways of saying this is what I think you could do to make it better. I think it's just like little tweaks here and there, and I like the focus on Trinity, on Regina Hall's character. I like the focus
Hmm.
on her character, but because the film turns on Lee Curtis, the Sterling Brown character, you like you said, you don't really get enough of him.
Yeah,
Although you do get a lot of him though, but like maybe just not deep enough of him. But I do love that we take the perspective of the quote unquote first lady of all this
yeah,
and all the hats and all the hats and outfits that they have.
yeah. It's a really interesting glimpse in just inside that whole world of the
It's
megachurch as
crazy.
well. One thing I did actually really appreciate too is that the movie does so the setup is that they're trying to have their like comeback after this scandal, and the film takes a long time and really sort of plays with your assumptions a little bit about what exactly that scandal is going to be, and it
Mm-hmm.
never
It's
really
true.
actually makes it 100% clear what exactly went down. And I actually really appreciate that because in the end of the day it doesn't actually really matter. But it allows the actors the space to perform around it and to sort of fill your imagination with what might possibly have been happened because of their reactions. And I think that Sterling K. Brown does a really, really good job at that. And there's one of the people that he has is alleged to have done something with is played by an actor called Austin Crute, and the character's name is Khalil. And he only has like two scenes in the whole movie, and he's really powerful in both of them. And even
Mm-hmm.
you don't really know exactly what went down between them, but not telling us, it's kind of like a horror movie, right? Whatever you can imagine is behind the door is scarier than whatever is actually behind the door.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
that's a good way to put it.
I really appreciated that about it. So I mean, again, this is a good movie. You should definitely see it. And I would agree with you as well that if you can see this movie in a crowd, like a good reactive crowd, this is probably
Yeah.
going to be a great movie because
Yeah.
it's one thing where getting to watch movies at home is great. But there's certain kinds of movies where seeing them in a crowd is the right way to do it, and this is probably one of those movies. Like
I agree.
I don't think Top Gun would be as impactful if I hadn't seen it on opening night with a full house, right? Like this movie needs a crowd of people who are worked up, who are into it, and who are laughing at the jokes to really pull you along. And that sort of group experience of watching a movies would really do this one well, I think.
I wonder how it's going to play in the like the South in the States, like in Georgia and those places. Like I wonder if
Mm.
how funny they would find it, or obviously there will be a group of people who do are offended by it as well, because it is attacking their church, which, as we know from the movie and just generally speaking, church is a big part of America. It's they
Hmm.
always say it's like the three F's, right? It's like family, faith, and football. I
Hmm.
always found that really funny that that was a thing in the States. But but yeah, I mean, like I don't really appreciate. I don't think just how ingrained church culture is, especially in the southern parts of the states. But I do wonder how it's going to play there, because I saw, I don't know if it's Sterling K. Brown or Regina Hall's social media, but one of them posted up like the trailer. I think they both did, and just like to promote the movie. And there were a few comments that were just like, "You're making fun of the church, aren't you?" Sad face. Like they're not at all happy about it. And people are like, "Yep, that's what people like. That's what this Hollywood group do, is they make fun of the church and things." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting, because this is not necessarily, it is attacking the church in a way, but I don't think in a way that is unjustified. Like it's more about what this specific pastor has done as opposed to the system that the church creating what the pastor has done, if that makes sense."
Yeah, I mean, it's not Spotlight. Like, it's not.
No,
It's not.
yes,
It's not
yes, yes,
attacking the system,
yes.
right?
Yeah, that's absolutely
Although,
true.
this kind of thing, this story of a pastor who, especially, there's a scene fairly late in the movie that's there's a lot of really great scenes in this movie that are basically um, Sterling K. Brown watching like old home videos of his old sermons when he was leading hundreds of thousands of people at a time, and one of them is a really homophobic rant.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a real pattern of like church pastor who's a homophobe turns out to be gay.
Yeah.
Like it's I don't think they're being made fun of for anything that isn't real. And I always find it really funny, and I always find it interesting to remind myself that like there's people commenting that you're mentioning that are saying like, oh, Hollywood's attacking our church, but like Adamma Ebo is from there and lived through this. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
she made a movie, but like she's one of you. Like, it
Yeah.
always reminds me that people who watch movies, everyday people who watch movies don't know as much about movies as say you or I do. And I find that's a good thing to remember at times.
It's true. Like, I mean, I really enjoy reading the press kits of movies, because I like hearing what the directors have to say about how they made it. I mean, most of it, to be honest, is kind of redundant. Like, they're, oh, like this actor was perfect for the role. It's like, yeah, I get it. But I
Hmm.
love to hear what their inspiration was for it. And the press kit for this one's in particular very, very interesting, because I think Adama, she puts a lot of personal touches and a lot of personal stories in there that I think make you see the movie in a bit of a different way. One aspect she talked about, which I really commiserate with and I find really refreshing, is she was saying how she wanted to make a movie that was just about, it wasn't about black people. It wasn't about a black person and their struggle in society. It's just a movie and the people happen to be black in it. And with that comes, obviously some cultural points and references and things like that. But I find right now we're at a point where anytime that there's, not a white main character, their race becomes the focal point of it. And I think we're moving away from that, because I'm starting to see a few projects that don't necessarily focus on the race of the character, because it could be played by anybody. Like this
Hmm.
very well could have been a white couple, like a white mega church pastor and first lady, because they exist too. But it's I find that really refreshing, that hopefully we're going back, because when I was growing up there was movies like that were shown primarily on BET, but it was like The Best Man and Baby Boy, and those weren't necessarily about the struggle of the black man or struggle of the black woman. It was just a movie, and the people, the cast was just black.
Hmm.
And hopefully we kind of go back to that, because I understand right now with the social discourse and everything that it's a little bit different. But yeah, it's nice to see a movie like this where just feels like this really does feel like one of those kinds of movies, and I appreciate that, and it feels a little bit nostalgic.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a place for both of those kinds of movies, and
Definitely, yeah.
we need both of them. Speaking of, if you want to watch something like as a companion piece, this might be a really interesting one to watch in and around watching The Righteous Gemstones, that HBO show. I don't know if you've watched that show, but
I haven't, no.
it is about a mega church in the South, and
Interesting.
it's really. I mean, if you're familiar with oh wow, his name has gone straight out of my head now that I have to say it out loud. Um, wow, it's the guy who did
I
Eastbound and Down. Um,
I'd
uh,
help you, but I have no idea who's in this show.
I can like see his face, and it's really embarrassing that I can't remember his name. It's Danny McBride and Jody Hill.
Oh.
Jesus, Jesus H Christmas. Um, yeah, Danny McBride plays like the eldest son of a megachurch pastor, played by John Goodman, and it's all about him and his
Oh,
two
okay.
siblings who are like jockeying to be the next megachurch pastor. It's really good in a really awful cringe kind of. If you like Eastbound and Down and Vice Principals, you should watch the show. Um, but it'd be an interesting companion piece because it doesn't explore exactly the same things, but it does definitely explore more of the like these people are actually morally corrupt aspect of megachurch leadership. Um,
I'll throw another title out there that I don't know how easy this is to get a hold of, so I don't even know why I'm mentioning it. But I just because I saw it recently. It's a movie. It's a Singaporean movie actually called "Look at Me." It's hashtag
mhm.
"Look at Me" is the official title. Um, and it came out recently at the New York Asian Film Festival, just maybe about a month ago. But it starts with a pastor who's in not as mega as the American mega church, but like an Asian
But
version of a mega church. So a little smaller, not as big because the Americans like to do things a lot bigger. Um, and they have the same thing because they have or they used to. The law's now getting repealed as of I think last week they announced it. But the Singapore had a criminal a Singapore had a law that basically made it illegal criminal activity for two gay men to have engage in sexual activity with one another.
mhm.
And that was a carryover from a British law from ages and ages ago. But when Singapore became their own country, they kept it. And the movie follows like a pair of twins, one who's gay and one who's straight, and and they end up at like a megachurch sermon, and the pastor's going on and on and on about how, I have no problems with gay people, but they're living in sin and da 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 and all that kind of stuff. And then at the end, it turns out, or I mean, maybe I shouldn't spoil this, but yeah, it turns out he's gay himself. So
Of course.
it's not just about that, but it is kind of um, it is heavily rests on that storyline. So yeah, that's like another interesting one to look at in terms of a non-American, non-white, non-black kind of view of a very similar topic, which just goes to show that maybe we just shouldn't have mega churches in the world. That's
I
just my
mean,
piece.
maybe I don't know that there's space to have that discussion on our movie podcast. um, but yeah, it is interesting how in a lot of these stories and in the real world, it's uh, whatever you are, accuse your enemy of being bad. It's an interesting psychological thing that I'm sure there's tons of writing about. Um, so yeah, Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul comes out on Friday, the 2nd of September. Although in some places I know there's like late night screenings on Thursday. So in whatever Canadian city you're in, it should be playing. Rachel, what will you give this film out of 5? And as a reminder, whole numbers only on our show.
Probably give it a 3.
Yeah, it's a 3 for
I
me
think
as
it's
well.
pretty. Yeah, 3 is probably what I would go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, again, I think that's a great place to put it because again, it's kind of like it's really good. It's not quite great, but it's really good. So it's a 3.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth seeing just for the lead performances because they are
They're amazing. The
you
two of them
can't.
are really good. And also if like in terms of costume design as well, they do a really, really good job with that. Like some of the stuff that Sterling K. Brown wears, some stuff that Regina Hall wears is pretty amazing.
I will say that I wish I could pull off any of the suits that Sterling K. Brown wears.
They look
In the
amazing.
They
Like
look
he does
amazing.
3-piece mostly throughout. They look real good. And
Yeah.
I'm not a hat person. I have a very large head, so I can't really wear hats. But Regina Hall, she really pulls them off, and they look amazing on her.
Yeah. 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 It's a good movie. We should see it. So now we're going to move on to our second movie of the show, which is director George Miller's latest film, 3,000 Years of Longing. This is George Miller's follow up to the. I think he hasn't done anything between this and Mad Max Fury Road, I don't believe.
No, I don't
Um,
think so.
and this is a story. It's Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba, and Tilda Swinton plays an academic who finds a glass bottle while she's at a conference in Istanbul, and when she opens that bottle, a jinn, played by Idris Elba, pops out and says she can have 3 wishes as long as they are her heart's desire. And that is the setup that the trailer probably told you, and it's not incorrect. But what the trailer doesn't tell you is that the rest of this movie is basically them sitting in a hotel room telling each other stories for 2 hours and 10 minutes, I think.
Is that
Um,
how long this movie was?
it's at least 2 hours. I think it's 2 hours. It's around 2 hours. Um, and it's very sweet and it's very well performed, but it is also very slow. And I'm not kidding when I say that is pretty much the whole story, except for that in the third act they relocate to London, where they continue telling stories. Um, yeah, Rachel, what did you think of 3,000 Years of Longing? Broad strokes.
So I'm just gonna put some on the wiki page, and it says the runtime is 108 minutes. And so I would say if you take out the intro and the credits, I think you're running at like a tight 90-minute movie, but it doesn't feel like a 90-minute movie,
Yeah, it does
as you
not feel like
clearly just demonstrated. It doesn't feel like that at all. I'm even more conflicted about this one than I am about Honk for Jesus, because I really like this type of storytelling. Like I like this. It's not really a genre of story, is it? But I love stories about like jinn and genies and things like that.
hmm
Like I find it really fascinating. I read a book a few years back now. It's by Helen Wecker. It's called The Golem and the Jinni, and is by far one of my favorite things that I've read in the last like 20 years of my life. Like it's a phenomenal book, and there's just such a great history and story behind the jinn, like a jinni or a genie. And so I like the movie on the concept, but I can't really say that I really enjoyed it. But I don't know if this is one of those movies that come the end of the year I'm still thinking about it and I still really enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like
hmm
it's kind of one of those, but it is very slow. It's incredibly slow, and I know George Miller is mostly, you go for his movies because of the visuals, and people are like, it's very, I've read some of the reviews and people are like, it's very visually rich. And I actually didn't really care for the visuals that much.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't think it looked that good, but I enjoyed the stories that were being told via Idris Elba and as the Jinn. Like it's kind of historical fiction in that sense of going back to some of the more treasured fables and stories and myths of Arabian history in particular. And I enjoyed that part, but the visuals just didn't do it for me. But I mean, I don't know if I said it. I might have actually. I think I randomly did say it the last time I was here. I wasn't a big fan of Mad Max, so it could just be George Miller's visual storytelling isn't for me. So I don't know.
Interesting. I think the thing for me is that, and I'm fully admitting that this is a mistake on my part, that like I love Mad Max. I love all of them. I even love the quote bad one. Whichever one you think the bad one is, I like it. So just insert that one. Um, Although I mean there is one that's not quite as good as the other 3, but that's a whole other discussion. But I definitely went in expecting a different kind of movie,
Okay.
something a little more dynamic, something a little faster moving, a little more, for lack of a better word, explosive. um, and that's on me not only because you shouldn't trust trailers, but also because Mad Max, George Miller has a long filmography of making super weird and very diverse things, like
Babe.
Babe,
He was
and
Babe.
and Babe 2. Babe 2 is a
Yeah, Babe
certified
too. Babe 2 in the
masterpiece.
City.
Happy Feet are
Yeah.
great kids movies. I even like in the late 80s he did The Witches of Eastwick with
I never saw that.
Nicholson and Pfeiffer and Susan Sarandon and Cher. That is a fun movie. Totally different from anything else he's ever done. Same with what was the one he did with I think it was Sean Connery, Medicine Man. I think that was George Miller. And I can just Google it. I have three screens in front of me. No, I'm thinking of Lorenzo's Oil, which is another one that is like, again, a very well acted movie about a very deep subject, totally different from everything else that he has done. Like the man makes different movies. He makes Mad Max and he makes other kinds of movies. And this is definitely a different kind of movie from Mad Max. So I think I was let down by my own expectations. Um, and that's tough though, right? Because I was not
Yeah.
expecting. I found the movie very sweet. Like I found the stories very sweet, and I found them very well told. I liked most of the visuals. There were a few transitions and a few things that I was like, "Why is this even here?" Yeah, especially in the like, there's it's not. There's a couple of like clear divisions between acts in the story. They don't have the stories themselves have title cards, but then there's some all the other sort of like inserted visual pieces that I was like, I don't, this is pretty, I guess, but it serves no purpose.
I thought the title cards were really random too. Like I feel like we went through a good chunk of the movie without a title card, and then all of a sudden a title card appeared, and I was like, "Oh, it's one of those movies with title cards." I don't know
Yeah,
why I think it's like a typical type of or a specific type of movie,
yeah, and
but
you know
I
what?
it just it felt random.
And I think that's because, and maybe I'm misremembering this, but I only saw the movie 2 days ago. But when the Jin is telling stories, the first one doesn't have a title card, but then the rest of them do. Am I misremembering
Or
that?
maybe that's why I thought it was odd, like or something just didn't seem consistent. And I mean, it's a very small point, but I think in terms of carrying you along in the film, like from beginning to end, that kind of inconsistency, maybe it does make it feel. Maybe that's what made it feel a bit like languid in terms of pacing. Like it just didn't. We weren't on board straight from the jump of what the movie was gonna be. But it's interesting that you say like your expectations weren't met because I didn't really know anything about the movie going into it, and I tried to do that for most movies. I try not to watch a trailer. I try not to know too much about it, because that's happened to me one too many times where it's like you think a movie is going to be a particular way. So
For sure,
when
yeah,
the movie started and I realized where it was going, I actually got really excited. I was like, oh, it's going to be like one of these types of movies or these types of stories that I really enjoy. Um, so that's interesting. Would you ever go back to watch it like months, years later? Would it interest you enough to go back to see like now that you know what it's about and you've
oh
had it
yeah,
view, like would you go
100%.
back?
Let's to be
Yeah.
clear, I like this movie.
Hmm.
As with the last one, as with Honk for Jesus, I didn't love this movie, but I did like it,
Hmm.
and I did enjoy it. I did actually. I really liked how sweet it was. I actually really enjoyed basically all of the stories. I enjoyed that it was full of actors who um, I had never really seen before,
Yeah.
other than Idris Elba and Tilda Swinton. I thought that the aside from the effects work, I thought a lot of the cinematography was gorgeous. Um, and I thought that George Miller and his team did a really good job of making a lot of really attractive people look really attractive.
Yeah.
Which you know,
Yeah.
I'm a human being; you can deal with that. It's so, and I also, and I don't know if I've ever talked with you about this, but I've definitely talked about it on this podcast before. I respond very strongly to movies that feel like plays, and this movie
Okay.
feels like a play. Like I respond to movies where it's 2 to 3 people talking a lot, and that is what this movie is.
I'm
So in a
speaking
lot
the
of ways,
language.
this movie is directly up my alley. So I feel very conflicted about my reaction to it because on the one hand, like I watched about half of one trailer, so I didn't really have that much sense of what it was going to be going in. I just got excited because I, very generally speaking, really like George Miller movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sort of expecting it to be a certain kind of George Miller movie, and then I forgot that he doesn't really have a certain kind of movie that he makes. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, I mean, I feel like in fact I will certainly see this movie again because I want to dig into it a little bit more. And I feel like multiple rewatches. This is one of those movies where I couldn't tell you right now for sure, but it feels like multiple rewatches will be either very rewarding or not that. You know, it'll be one or the other. It'll definitely change my opinion one way or
Yeah.
the other. And I look forward to finding out which one of those ways it is.
Yes, I really think that this is a movie that I'm going to like more as time goes by, whether or not I rewatch it or not. I just feel like I always judge a lot of movies by like how much they stick with me, especially as the months go by. And if it's a
Hmm.
movie that's still kind of latched on to me somehow or on my brain, or I think about it every now and then, which I have. I only watched this a few days. I watched it before you, but it hasn't been that long. Um, but I enjoy it, and I again, it's kind of like the Honk for Jesus one, where I feel like it could have been really, really great. Like you're working with some really interesting storytelling, and you've got great actors to do it with as well.
Hmm.
But I love that. I mean, for most people, I think when we get introduced to the idea of a genie, when I say most people, I think most of us outside of if you don't live in like an Arabic country or live outside that culture, we mostly got introduced to the idea of a genie from like Aladdin, where it
Hmm.
was, you got three wishes and it's all fun, and that's always like a little schoolyard game of like, oh, if you had three wishes, what would you do? Um, but even the end of Aladdin, they kind of touch on the idea of freedom and the fact that he's like in the itty bitty lantern and all that kind of stuff. But I like that this movie really focused on the loneliness aspect of the jinn and just like how
Hmm.
tortured it was for him to live in there. One of the lines that kind of stuck with me was when she was like, when Tilda Swinton's character Althea is saying, "Well, you probably just got like a really long nap, like sitting in there for hundreds of years," and he's like, "Jinn don't sleep." And it's like, oh,
Hmm.
that's torturous to just be in this little bottle and you can't even take a nap. Like, so I like that, but I wonder if they had gone even further with that, like really, because that was kind of the whole point of the movie, was looking at the lack of freedom that he has as a jinn because he has to be tied to somebody to grant them the wishes in order to get his freedom. And then just the loneliness of basically being an immortal creature that lives forever. So I feel like you could have, maybe they could have dug into it a little bit more and left behind some of the visual flourishes that were in there. But that's just me talking because I didn't care for the visual flourishes as much as most people seem to agree that those were a strong point in the movie.
Yeah. I do wonder, there's probably space for, and I feel, just to be clear, I feel, as a middle aged white dude from Canada, I feel very ill equipped to talk about this in any real great depth. But, like, I think there's probably also some space to talk about, is George Miller necessarily the right director for this very Middle Eastern story?
Yeah.
And also, did anyone, like, how purposeful was it that the woman who found the bottle is white and the jinn that comes out of it, who is effectively her slave, is black?
Yeah.
Like, there's
Yeah.
a ton of space to talk about lots of different things in here, and I think that's probably, again, sort of outside where I'm prepared to go today, but like there's definitely a lot to think about in this movie that, for good or ill.
I agree with
And I
that.
think
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I think that this film is probably going to stick with me for a lot of those reasons. Um, and yeah, just again, it's either way, the performances are pretty great, and I think it's probably also one of the things that I think might make it not stick quite as well for me is that you go into a movie expecting one story, and this film is really more like a series of vignettes. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
really one cohesive story. All and those vignettes are all really entertaining, but they don't. None of them really satisfy that itch in the same way that like one long cohesive story would, or if the final one, if Tilda Swinton's story had resolved. Uh, I mean, it does resolve. I don't know. I feel like the third story, the last story, her story, didn't tie it all together necessarily in a way that made it satisfying. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think that the idea of it being split into vignettes as well, that comes from the fact that, he adopted it from a short story, which I did start reading actually after I should probably go back and finish it.
Yeah, I think
After I saw the movie, but
it's a book of short stories, isn't it? Like
yeah,
it's
exactly. Yeah, which is it's the book itself is called The Gin and the Nightingale's Eye. And it's literally, I mean, it's a series of short stories, and like that's how he decided to I say he, I mean George Miller. I
yeah.
said it with such contempt, like that's how he decided to do it. Um but I agree with you. I think if there was like a more through line, or because I don't think the payoff with Tilda Swinton's character is enough. Because to me, she just feels like you could have done this whole movie without an actor like Tilda Swinton. To be honest, you didn't need such a big actor, um, such a force on the screen. It helps. It obviously helps, but it's really, the movie's not really about her that much. It's not really, you know, she's just our she's just kind of like, I don't know, I'm thinking about this. It's like she's like a cracker, and I don't mean that in a racial way. I'm just thinking like I just realized what that sounded like. Like it's just like, when you have like a cracker and you put like cheese and sauces and stuff like that, like, and but what you're really after is the dip. You're not like, the cheese is just the thing, or the cracker is just the thing that gets you the
Yeah,
dip. And
yeah. I get
to
what you're trying to say.
me, yeah, I went down a weird path there,
Yeah.
but I'm not trying to
Well,
call Tilda Swinton a cracker, is what I'm just, like, to be clear.
yeah. I don't disagree with anything you're saying in particular. Although I will say that if you're going to cast someone to be a solitary academic, northern British narratologist, who else are you going to cast in this movie?
It's
Really, like
true.
it's Tilda
Also,
Swinton is like that role is written
it
for
has to
Tilda
be
Swinton.
her.
Yeah,
I also want to say I love the idea that there was something called a narratologist. I was like, that's the greatest thing I've ever. I don't know if that's a real profession, but that is an amazing word and an amazing area of study that I would love to do. I'm sure it is a very much so an area of study. Like, I know literature and all that, but I like the idea of somebody introducing themselves to you and they're like, "I'm a narratologist," and you're like, "What the f- is that supposed to mean?" Like, what the hell? That sounds so made up. But you're right. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, who else could it be other than Tilda Swinton? But yeah, it would have been nice to have a bit more substance with her, almost, because there was a point, I mean, not to spoil the movie, but like there was a point where in one of the Jin's stories, he encounters a young woman who has a lot of the same physical attributes that we see in Tilda Swinton's character, like the way that they're shaking their leg and the way that they read the book. And I thought that there was going to be some, I don't know, some coming together there at the end, but
Yeah,
nothing. It didn't really happen. And I was like, oh, and I kind of forgot about it until just this very minute. That
yeah.
I thought that there was going to be some connection there. But yeah, I agree with you though. It's a good movie, not a great movie, but maybe over time it'll become great. And I
I think
don't like George Miller's like most prolific work, but I will say I like him as a director because anybody who does like Babe, Pig in the City, and Mad Max, and 3,000 Years of Longing, and the Lorenzo's Oil, like that's amazing to me.
yeah. I mean, yeah. He's a good director. He has a very interesting and I think unique visual sense that
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean that I think did well by the movie. Um,
I think he's like the thinking man, Zack Snyder.
maybe that's actually maybe a really good way to put it.
No slow motion, none of
Yeah.
that stuff. We don't do
or
slow
or
motion. That
or at the very least appropriate slow motion.
Yeah. not not every 5 seconds there's like a slow-mo thing. Yeah, no.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's good. I think it's worthwhile to check out as well. I think it's do you think it's one that you need to see in theaters though?
I think that I'm glad that I saw it in a theater. Yes, I saw it in
Okay.
a theater with a preview screening that was nearly full. It was
Oh wow.
not the biggest theater in the city, but it was nearly full, and I found that um, it was interesting because the crowd wasn't like hooting and hollering or anything because it's not that kind of movie, but the crowd was clearly like wrapped up in the story,
Oh,
and
that's
it was
nice.
really interesting to hear people talking about it when the movie was over. Because even there was two dudes right behind me who were like, every once in a while I just look around because it's, I like seeing how people are reacting to things, and these dudes were like wrapped in the story, and at the end I could overhear them talking, and they were like, well, that was a missed opportunity, talking about how they just
Oh.
really like it. And I was like, you were leaning forward in your seat the whole time, sir. Like, but what I found really interesting is that most of the people I was listening, I listened to people talk during credits, and one of the things I noticed was that most of the people who were like, I didn't really like that, were dudes, and most of the people who were like, well, that was lovely, were women. So do with that information what you will.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I mean it is very story based. Like that's the thing. Like it is one of those, like you said, like you can get wrapped up in the story, but there's no big punch. There's no big
Yeah,
I mean, I think you said you used the word explosion before. Like there's none of that kind of I
yeah,
mean, it's not that kind of movie. Like that's not the kind of movie it is, but like even like philosophically speaking, there is no big punch. Like there's no big philosophical punch or explosion in the film. But yeah, overall, I think it's another one of those movies. I think it definitely has an audience, though. I think that there's going to be a group of people who love this movie and won't shut up about it later and telling us how we're all stupid for not liking it. But
yeah.
again, I do like it,
I
but
actually
not
look
liking it
forward.
as much as they do.
I actually look forward to seeing who within film Twitter is that person this
Yeah,
time. Because I
true.
often find that when someone has like a passion for a film and talks about it a lot on Twitter, I actually generally really enjoy that.
It's nice when other
So
people like things. It's nice when people have passions.
yeah, and we're in such a. I was talking about this on Twitter just today, actually, that like we're in such a weird place of the online discourse that we farm so much hate and negative takes that when someone has a real passion for something I like, that I actually really respond to it, and I'm like, yeah, you go, you talk about the thing you love, because I just want to hear nice things, man. Just please say nice things about something. But
This is
that's
very
again,
off topic, but like, and I know we're running a bit long, but I was at a wedding and there was sitting next to someone who I did kind of know, but she was an opera singer. She used to be like a proper opera singer. And she was saying in one of her courses when she was studying opera, they used to have to write criticism for like old operas, and they used to have to write up critiques in the same way that you and I do for film critiques. And her professor was like, it's really easy to be negative about stuff, and it's really easy to find the things that are bad about it and to write about it at length. But it's very tough to see like what is actually makes it great and what makes a thing good. So he goes, focus on that, and not to say like give everything a positive thing. Sometimes stuff sucks, and that's what are you gonna do? But it is hard to find the good in something sometimes because I think naturally we just want to critique it, which is a shame.
yeah. What's even, the great Roger Ebert once said that when you're writing a review and it's something you didn't like, you still have to write it in such a way that the person who will like the movie knows they will like the movie and will go see it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, well,
What a
so
nice place
3,000,
to end on.
I know, right? So 3,000 years of longing out of five for you is a,
I'd go three again, actually. I do another three.
yeah, me too. It's a three kind of day. It's an interesting theme of films, actually. Just that
Yeah.
through line of like, we kind of both wish both of these were better than they are.
Yeah. But yeah, we both really like them. Like we both did enjoy watching them, but I think it's
Yeah,
just there's like a nagging feeling that there could have been something here or there that could have made it a great, great movie.
yeah, 100%. Well, that's where I think we're going to end for today. Rachel, where can people find you?
You can go to my website, which is rachelkh.com, and I'm on Twitter _RachelKH.
Yeah. Anything recent you want to plug?
I did a review for Beast, which actually is Idris Elba as well. So there you
Hmm.
go. There's that. That's on Exclaim. I just finished recording an episode of Contra Zoom Pod with Dakota, and we did a TIFF preview. So TIFF's coming up in a couple weeks. Is it a
Hmm.
couple weeks or 1 week? I don't know. It's coming up soon, and there's gonna be a lot of TIFF stuff soon from coming my way. Or
Yeah, because you're a member of Toronto Critics as well, right? So you
I am.
must
Yeah,
be the big one of the year for you.
yeah. I'm excited. It's my first time too doing covering a festival. Like it's all in person. It's all kind of like what it used to be before COVID and everything like that. Because all of the festivals that I've done pretty much have all been virtual. Like TIFF last year was a hybrid, so I did a lot of online stuff. But like this year, there's seems like they're bringing back, all the parties and all the people are coming, and yeah, seems it should be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're patiently waiting to find out exactly how VIF is going to go down, and for the same reasons.
Yeah,
Because
that'll be fun. Oh, have they not announced if it's going to be like online or hybrid or
I
in
think much
person?
like because TIFF is doing the thing where they're having a fully in-person festival, and then following that,
Yeah.
they're doing like 10 days of online screenings. And
Yes.
I don't know, maybe they have, but I haven't seen what VIF is doing exactly. But I hope they have VIF Connect that's running all the time. So I hope there's at
Hmm.
least some online component because that's all I'm going to have time for this year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Well, so everyone go check out Rachel's stuff because she is great and she has the best radio voice in the business. We are going to end there. If you would like to find streaming links for either of these movies, they won't be there right now, but they're on our site. They're powered by Just Watch, so when those films are available on demand, you will be able to find them there. You can also find us on Twitter at AwesomeFridaysCA or me on Twitter at SmatthewAF. And what else do I need to say? We record this here in
Simon's. What's
Vancouver.
Simon's Twitter?
Oh, Simon is at Temporary Pen, but he's not here, so I think that's
No, we
fine.
still give Simon. What's Simon's
Yeah,
socials? Shout that out.
yeah. Simon's on vacation, and we're all very jealous. Um, we record this here in Vancouver, or in Rachel's case in Toronto, but it's produced here in Vancouver on the unceded lands of the Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish nations. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate each and every one of you. Check the show notes for all the links for Patreons and socials and all of the stuff. And thank you very much for listening on this awesome Friday.